Hello, friends. Welcome to the Awakening to Purpose podcast. This is your host, Lou Redmond. Today, we have Jessica Amos. I always forget if I'm saying her name right. Jessica Amos is a mindfulness teacher, life coach, punk rocker, and founder of Stay With Yourself, the practice of being who you are, where you are. With 1 million students worldwide, Jessica's teaching style is down to earth, heartfelt, and conversational, like you are connecting intimately with a safe and trustworthy friend. I feel a lot of similarity in the way that I hold space for others, being a friend on the journey. So, Jessica, it's good to connect with you here, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Very good to be here. And I'm very glad that you are doing this podcast.
Thank you. I need that. Um, so you say it in the description, but maybe we can just pull it apart. What does it mean to stay with yourself?
Yeah, so it's the tagline is, I say it's the practice of being who you are, where you are. And then I like to follow up. It's also the practice of honoring yourself each moment, really being present to all that is unfolding, that is you and that is life that's happening all around you. And ultimately, to take that a step deeper, it's that, we're not the same in every moment and every day and day to day. The tone, the texture, the emotions, the feeling, our bodies, all of it, life is rising and falling in all these other ever changing ways. So to stay with ourselves is to stay present with ourselves, with whatever is unfolding within us and without and outside of us at all times, really. It's a lifetime practice, it's a motto, it's a mantra, it's a movement, it's whatever you need it to be.
So it's also giving ourselves permission to not be the self we were yesterday or last week or last year, which I think is
Yes.
such a crucial thing. It's actually something I wanted to talk about a little later on, but I love how you just said that because we get so trapped in feeling like we start something or feel like we need to stick with something or be the person that we are. So to stay with ourselves in this moment unapologetically is really powerful and I think a needed message.
Yes. Yes, and I like that you said, like, unapologetically, because for a long time I was playing around with the phrase of unapologetic freedom, which is to stay with yourself, which is sort of this the ever-changing nature, and the way that we expressed last year is not necessarily how we're expressing today or 2 minutes ago, you know? So honoring that we are exactly, that we're ever changing and not keep ourselves in a small box.
So I know we talked about this when we've actually met in person before, but for the sake of this podcast called Awakening to Purpose,
Mm.
was there a time, a moment, part of your life where that phrase or a phrase similar to it rings true for you, where you realized maybe that you weren't staying with yourself and
Mm.
started on that self growth, awakening, whatever the path you might, whatever the name you might call it, was
Yeah.
there? Is there a moment or was it like a gradual thing?
Both. Both. I would say it's been like kind of a tiered journey, many moments of awakening. But there's two in particular. There's two big it's areas of times in my life. The first was when I got pregnant with my daughter, my firstborn child. Um, over 18 years ago now. And something about this new life in my belly awakened me to a lot of it, just starting to investigate how I grew up and then how I wanted to raise this child. And I was suddenly like, oh, I don't want the same things for my child that I experienced. And I began to pull at this thread of like kind of questioning a lot of things. And then as I pulled at that thread, I kind of started unraveling everything I ever thought and ever believed and ever thought I knew about anything in all of life. So that I would say was a very big time of awakening. And it was tumultuous and surprising and I didn't mean to, I just did. Um, and then the second round of that, the next level of that in terms of, and so that kind of just awakened me. And then awakening to purpose came, I don't know how many years later, 7, 8 years later, where I was, my marriage was pretty painful at the time. I had 2 small kids in grade school. I was just feeling very lost and ungrounded and disconnected and very emotional and reactive and all these things in my life. And a friend encouraged me to start meditating. So he kept saying, do the Oprah Deepak 21-day meditation challenge. And I'm like, no, that's dumb. I'm not going to meditate with Oprah. That's stupid. Um, meditation's supposed to be something else. But after about a year of him insisting, I took this 21-day meditation challenge with Oprah and Deepak for free. And it cracked my heart wide open. And I proceeded to take the next 21 days, and the next 21 days, and the next 21 days. And I was meditating every day. And then I started going to yoga and doing all, and I started to take on the mindset of, it takes two to tango, and I have to make sure that I'm keeping my side of the street clean, so to speak, in my marriage and in my life. And I have to investigate my part in all of my pain and in all of the blame and all the victimhood that I was really carrying at that time. So I was like, hey, I'm going to start, I more intentionally was like, I'm going to start doing the work. And it wasn't called the work at the time. There was no the work. But that's what it was. Yeah. So that's the long and short of it.
It's funny. Well, 2 things in there. One, I love the image of pulling a thread. I use that a lot in a coaching context of just let's pull this one thread, see what else wants to unravel, because we can't really quite know what is that next stage for us.
Yeah.
And then the other piece of just how much it relates in some ways, because one of the first meditation things that I did was that 21-day Deepak and Oprah, and for no reason it led me to having this wild experience a few months later. But I always remember it being like a pillar in a way, even though I probably didn't complete the 21 days. Maybe I did like 5 or something. I don't even think I just remember that being a thing. So that's really interesting how that lines up. Thanks, Deepak and Oprah, if you're listening to this.
Shout out to Oprah and Deepak.
So 2 moments. Is there a third? Is there like another? I guess when's the moment of, okay.
Oh, the purpose piece.
When do you start giving it back, I guess, in a way?
Yeah. So around that second time of awakening, I started meditating. I was meditating all the time. I had started doing daily pages from the Artist's Way. So I'd kind of been practicing a couple things. So it was a little more extended period. But the yoga studio, I was also putting on these storytelling events at the time called Stories from the Dark Side, where it was basically the point was to share our stories in order to not keep things hidden, and to kind of really to find out that it's safe to let things be revealed, and then for an audience to find out they're not alone through hearing these stories. It's a really powerful event. And at the time I was going to marriage counseling, and my marriage counselor had told me I need to learn to stay with myself. So I started investigating what that meant to me, and that, so there was kind of a lot of little pieces happening where I was really exploring me and exploring my inner stories. And that thread I had pulled on all those years ago, it was still unraveling for me, and I was starting to go deeper. And the yoga studio I was going to at the time said, hey, would you like to teach a class here? And I was like, well, I mean, I'm not a yoga teacher. That seems ridiculous, but I'm really into meditation. I could probably lead a meditation class. So I started teaching meditation. It came to me very naturally, very easily. Guided meditations, guided visualizations, like all that came into play. Turns out I have a voice that works for it. And so my purpose more found me as I awakened to myself. And so these things just happened in a lot of ways for me. I said I want to build a website, and I had a web designer say, I will build you a $10,000 website because I want to build up my portfolio. I, said I want to do storytelling events, and I suddenly meet two people who put on events and whatever. I mean, it was this all kind of found me in a way, just because I was awakening to myself, and I was very alive. And I think I had a beginner's mind in all of it. I was energized. I was hungry. I was very awakened, very, like a new life, like a child being born. And, there was this responsiveness that I received from life, in return, without seeking any of those things. I had no goals for any of that. It's just what happened. So, I would say my purpose, I awakened to my purpose just through my personal awakening.
It's beautiful, and it reminds me of the magic of doing our own work and like the synchronicity that comes from that and how things kind of unfold. And I'm wondering, some people listening are familiar with synchronicity, and I know in my life, I cherish those moments when it's like, oh my gosh, things are just kind of appearing and everything's in
Mhm.
alignment, and it's doesn't always happen. However, when I read accounts of great sages or teachers, a lot of them will say like that is it. If you are in a connected state, you are really connected to yourself, then that has more of an opportunity to happen. And so I guess the question is, how often do you experience synchronicity or those kind of
Mm.
coincidences now? And do you find yourself going on and off? Like, how do you relate to that in your own life? Because just saying one last thing is I find that there's waves of it, and more recently things happen for me, but it feel like it's less, it feels less mysterious than it used
Mhm.
to in some ways. So maybe I'm just used to it. I don't know. So I'm just curious how you relate to that, if you relate to that at all.
Yeah, I actually really like this question. And I always really like talking to you, so this is fun. Um, yeah, I relate to what you said. I think that whenever I'm trying for it, it like doesn't happen, kind of thing. It's like
Mhm.
if I'm really trying for it and I'm really wanting it, and I'm like wanting to force, I don't know, there's something in, usually synchronicity happens when I'm not trying for anything.
Mm.
Um and I would say that I went through a period where I was trying for synchronicity, and I've sort of let it go. I haven't even thought about the word synchronicity or any of that for quite some time. And I think maybe some of it is that I'm in a place now where I've abandoned my path and my purpose so many times over the years, I've been very fickle about it, that I almost feel like right now it's less about synchronicity and more about me continuing to commit every day to the path that chose me and to choose it in return. And that right there is more the continual alignment that I want, is that I'm choosing every day what it is that chose me, and kind of surrendering to not my will but thine be done, in a sense.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, now I have to ask, because I'm imagining some people might have this experience or have times of this. What what was abandoning your purpose? Like, what was that? Like,
Hmm.
why did you do that, or what did it look like?
Yeah, I think it's looked like a lot of things. It's looked like me, well, I mean, in some ways, it's been necessary at times. Like when I did get divorced, I couldn't keep doing the teaching and stuff I was doing. I was too much in a certain state. I just went and got a job, and I just took care of my kids at home, and I took a nice couple years before I ever did anything again. So I don't know, I just set it aside. I walked away from it. There's times when I've been like, I want it to be like this, and it needs to look like this, and I'm gonna la la la, and it's not working, and I'm forcing and I'm forcing. And in some ways, I feel like that's kind of an abandonment too, an abandonment of what is, of what's here. It's abandoning the path for some path that I think is over there. that's not really a path. There's a path right in front of me. So it's, I think, abandoning it in a sense that is, um, not being honoring to what is actually here and what's actually arriving and what's actually in front of me. Because in terms of synchronicity, there's things arriving all the time. But what am I recognizing them as such? Am I choosing what's arriving back? Or am I abandoning it because I think it should look like that over there, because that's what someone else is doing, or that's what I'm told the 5 laws of success are, and whatever, right? As opposed to the success that's arriving through the fact that 3 live people showed up to a thing, and these are real human hearts in front of me. And I think some of it is maybe getting used to my surroundings and taking them for granted, and not finding them to be so spectacular as I once did. So I would say big abandonments and small abandonments, but even the resistance to showing up to do the work every day is abandonment in a sense as well too. Because the path is here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the ways you're reminding me of the War of Art. I don't know if you've read that
Mm,
book by Stephen
uh-uh.
Pressfield. He talks about
Mm-mm.
the resistance to any creative project or business or just something that is meaningful to you. And I love that book so much. It's like a Bible in some ways. And
Mm,
recently I'm actually learning how to find the balance with that mindset, the balance with I need to show up every day, and recognizing myself as someone who can benefit also by taking rest. And this is another topic that we don't have to jump right into now. Um, and also one other thing that Carl Jung would say that synchronicity is ever present for those who have eyes to see it. So often it
mhm.
is our our perception, or we're just life happens. And I'm imagining there's probably a lot of lessons for your work and for your purpose that came in the road, the diversions or stopping and coming back.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and that's part of it too, is it's even, there is a quote, God, I wish I could knew it verbatim and who said it. You might know. Basically it's in our attempt to avoid the path, we find it.
Mm,
So like even when even in the resistance, even in the abandonment, even in the rejection, that's the path too. So it's not even with judgment that we would go astray, so to speak. To go astray is the path also.
yes. Yes. You're reminding me, I
Yeah.
just had a conversation with someone I know at a coffee shop, and he has been starting to do some work on himself, and I've seen a lot of growth. And I was talking to him the other day, and although he had these things that he went to and worked on, he was just really beating himself up. He's like, yeah, I've really gotten off track and I haven't kept up with things. And I'm like,
Mhm.
dude, like, one, I see this like a GPS, right? Even if we, go down a side street, we're getting redirected right where we need to go. So we don't have to worry about that. But often it's okay to have those diversions. And he has another aspect of just being kinder towards himself, and so it's probably something that we all need to learn anyway. So the elusive question, when someone asks you, how do I find my purpose, what
Mm.
might you say to them?
Stop trying to find it.
That's good, that's good.
Like, don't do that. I mean, what trying to find it's like, it's
Yes.
not, it's like, I don't know, there's a sense, and I feel like you read it in books from mystics and poets and pretty much everything that it's all the same thing, just written differently or said differently. But there's this sense of like, you can never put your finger on it. You can't touch it, only it can touch you, so to speak. So there's like this feeling of, stop, like as soon as you, it's like magnet, like you can't, it just moves out from under any kind of movement towards it. So it almost feels to me like, just hold still at some of that stillness, and allowing it to arrive to you. and whisper to you and be like the breeze, you know, in your hair. Let it play with you. Let it come to you. And it's very much in the heart too. You're not going to find it in your mind. You're not going to find it by looking at what anyone else is doing. You're not going to find it in anywhere else. It's a very close, very intimate thing for you to hold still enough for purpose to find you. And it might be similar to, yeah, if you're driving down a street, maybe just pull over, you know, and let purpose catch up to you for a minute, you know, maybe get out and walk,
I love that.
and enjoy life a little bit. And through your enjoyment, it will be revealed, I think.
Something that's tangential to purpose is when we talk about gifts or unique
Mm.
gifts.
Mm-hmm.
What are your gifts?
Mm. I've been thinking about this lately. I've been asking the same question to myself.
Great.
um, so one thing I keep coming back to, which does relate, is I grew up going to church, and there was some Pentecostal, I don't know, tones to some of it. And one time, someone got a word from God that I had the gift of healing, of laying on of hands. And I was like, okay. And they're like, we want you to come over and lay hands on this person who's spraining their ankle very badly and just pray. And I was like, I mean, okay. I mean, it's not like I'm just kind of going along with it. And I lay hands on this person. I just pray for healing. And the next day, her ankle was completely not swollen. She could dance again. She was a dancer. So she went from being severely injured, unable to dance, to being able to dance the next night in a performance. And still in my mind, I'm like, I don't know. The power of her mental belief that I laid hands on her probably healed her, or maybe spirit was moving, or maybe it would have healed already on its own anyway. um, but all that to say, I do believe I have the gift of healing. And it's been evidenced more through what people have told me and the feedback I've received. And so I got to practice that. And for me, I think my gift of healing comes about through my gift of um, connecting to people's humanity, and being able to look people in the eye, being able to meet a human in any room that I'm in. And I'm not so much a teacher as more just a space holder. And like even in my profile description that you read at the beginning, I want you to feel like you're connecting intimately with a safe and trustworthy friend. That's my vibe. That's where the healing is there's a realness that I value. And John Lennon says, people think you want something from them or you expect something from them, and you don't. You just want them to be themselves so that you can be yourself. And so if I can just be myself, others can be themselves, and we can just be ourselves already, you know?
We could all stay with ourselves.
Yeah. So, if there's any kind of gift to glean out of that, I think it's a gift of healing, not so much in that something's broken, but in remembering that there's nothing to fix.
Well, underneath that, I don't know if this is helpful for you or not, but it sounds like you help people feel safe. And
Yeah.
that's definitely number one in letting ourselves heal. In a way, we have to let our nervous system feel like it's okay to even just be in the space. So, the
Yeah.
power of our own transformation is such a permission slip, and more than a permission slip, it's actually just a transmission. Like when we transform people. So just our state of being and holding that space is felt by others.
Yes.
Um, something that I'm so glad you're being a proponent of it. It's not my thing, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I
Mhm.
think it's a message that is needed, and that is the ascension culture message,
Mm.
especially
Mhm.
as someone gets on this path of spirituality. And it could, when new, at least I'll speak for me, I remember when it was very new, there's so much, but you don't realize that there's so much, and then it kind of gets washed in some ways in this only positive love and light, and go towards the light. And I have a natural proclivity to that. We could talk about that, but there can be such a push towards that way, where we
Mhm.
actually push away the dark. So talk about
Mhm.
ascension culture,
Mhm.
talk about what you're about, and were you, and also the question behind that is, did you fall into that in the past and have redirected, or have felt like you've always been more about like the darkness? And it sounds like from the storytelling things that maybe you always have been more about the darkness. So yeah,
Mhm.
say more about that, because I think it's an important message. It's important to have the counter to that message 100%.
Right. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I like that it's all things, light and dark exists together. That's very important that we have both. It's, we so when I think of, I've been talking about ascension culture and that's what I call it. I haven't heard anyone else call it that. I feel like
It's a
I'm
great
calling
name.
it
I think
that.
it's perfect.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it makes sense. I think people are like, that sounds like something that they know what that is. Um, so to me, it's like what I've been describing ascension culture as, like it's all the crystals, it's all the oracle cards, it's all the coaches. And I do coaches, I've done crystals, I do oracle cards, I've talked to the astrologers, I've done all the mindset stuff around manifestation and money and relationships and love and healing, and I've all this stuff. So it's no knock on any of it. It's just like it's almost a little bit misleading, I think. Like you said, my awakening was different in terms of, like, I didn't wake up at a time when ascension culture was even a thing, when this was the deal. I mean, my awakening happened on my laundry room floor sobbing when, Arms of the Angel came on the radio, and I'm in the middle of actually facing all my trauma that I went through as a kid, and I'm pregnant with a baby, not wanting to repeat those patterns, like very raw. So, there was no real like social media to tell me what it was supposed to be. It was a lot of crying and facing things and shadow work kind of stuff, which again also wasn't a phrase at the time. And so I think my counterpoint to the ascension culture and the love and the light and the love and the light and the love and the light is like we can't reach towards the light if we're not deeply rooted in the earth. Um, we are earthbound. We are earthbound. We are humans. We don't really know, what does ascending even mean? What if we must descend in order to ascend, is the question. To go deep into our hearts, into ourselves, root down into the become familiar with those darker parts of ourselves, face the things that we've been afraid to face, cry for them, grieve for them, feel them, let ourselves be completely surrendered before life in all of that we carry as humans, that is this very raw experience. And to find a groundedness in that, to find being held, to find that it's safe to go into the innermost chambers of your heart and find the deepest love that exists there. Like that's what's in the darkness. We grow in the dark. We come to, we gestate in the dark. Seeds are planted in the dark. Everything grows in the dark. So that's probably my affinity towards the darkness, and I have this punk rock thing I've always had, and heavy metal and different stuff. So it's probably part of my natural nature. Um, Also, I'm a very joyful person though, too. I'm a very happy person, actually. And part of my happiness is my delight in the darkness too. I delight in the darkness. So, um, that's more of, it feels like my natural instinct. It's almost just like an animal instinct. When I see everyone going up, I must go down. When I say see everyone going right, I must go left. I think there's something in my nature that was made to be a counterpoint. I don't know what it is, but I think it's part of why I'm into punk and rebelling, and I just got suspended on insight timer for cussing and shit. So it's like, um I think it's just built into me to be counter. um and so there's nothing wrong with us, the idea of ascending. It's just, I want to remind people that you're never going to escape this human life, and maybe the way to ascend is to first descend, um and be broken apart and unravel your life a bit, and then let yourself be born again and reach toward a sky that is more real and more true for you, that no one else can tell you what it is. And I think people are it's kind of fucking up people's nervous systems to be on all the time, and to have to be like taking like like to be in the light that much all the time when you're not deeply rooted. A plant will die if its roots aren't deep enough and it's getting scorched by the sun. So I don't know. I'm going off
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, it's great. And I realize without context, because I know you, but with someone that might not know you listening to this, and I'm just like, you love the dark. Tell us about the dark. And so, yes, I wasn't saying that you don't also are happy or joyful.
Yes,
So that's not what I
totally.
think of Jessica.
But that's like, that's people's fear of it too. Like when I say I'm going into the dark, I'm going into my cave for 3 months in the winter, people are like, are you okay? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm more than okay. But we have a fear of the dark. Yeah.
I think, have you ever heard of Bill Plotkin or read any of his
Mm-mm,
work?
mm-mm.
So Bill has been hugely foundational for me of learning about exactly what we're talking about right now. And for those of you that are interested in exploring this, he has a map of the psyches. He's a phenomenal depth psychologist, OG. I think he's like 70. He's been doing this work for so long. He takes people on these initiations, on vision quests. He has his most popular book is called Soulcraft, and talks about the map of the psyche and lays out and uses the actual directional points of north, south, east, and west. And let's just talk about east and west for right now, because that's what we're talking about. East is the sage, the mystic, going towards oneness, bliss consciousness. And it's associated with spirit, right? We think of a lot of enlightenment circles. It is like going towards spirit, oneness, losing our ego. And then you have west, which is the opposite of that, is everything we're talking about here in going towards soul. So he makes the difference between spirit and soul. So going towards
Mm,
soul, which is dark, heavy, where like the muse is, where there's just this different nature to it. That's actually, how do we find our unique soul calling on this earth in what we're here to do in this human realm? And a lot of people will get caught in searching for the bliss, right?
mhm.
There's almost like an addictive quality to the east. And so when I
Yes.
say like a
Mm,
natural proclivity and spending time, and I've done some of his retreats with people who are, if you lead this guy's retreats, you are west focused, you are more darkness focused. You're not, it's not even saying darkness, you're more grounding focused, you're more
mhm.
this kind of, the image that comes is like a cloudy, mystical, like mysterious.
Like a forest realm. It's
Yes,
deep and dark
exactly.
and damp and
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So
Uh-huh.
that's like that energy. And so in spending time with people that are more natural like that, like there's just like an inclination. And it's good. Like for me, who I can say I am more inclined towards the East,
Mhm.
and we have to be balanced, right? So the past 2 years for me have been actually doing more of that depth work. And so I
Mhm.
stay aware of it, and I don't lose myself and have some, shadow that I'm not, spending the time to understand. Uh,
Yeah.
so highly fascinating body of work. He's written a ton of books,
Mm.
and really, really fascinating for people that are trying to like, oh, spirit and soul are different. And how do we think about our connection in the difference, right? Um, Powerful. So shadow
Yeah.
work. I know you have a course on shadow work.
Mhm.
What It's a big topic. It's popular topic in
Mhm.
the coaching world. How, I guess, what if someone wants to start doing shadow work? where
Mhm.
might you direct them to start?
Yeah.
Do they have to have a coach? Can they start doing this on their own? I know you have a course on it, so maybe you direct them
Yeah.
to that. But
Yeah.
if you were to
Take
speak
my
a little
course.
bit. uh,
This is a good question. So I think, like I said before, I keep saying this, and I actually had someone recently tell me, they're like, you need to stop saying this. I'm going to say it again. Um, back when I back when I first started doing this work, there was no there was these are all very newly popularly coined phrases, shadow work, and I think it's
but I
coming
would
from
say, I
Carl
mean,
Jung.
yeah, I would say, like, if you,
Yeah.
unless you were doing Jungian psychology and depth psychology, or in those circles, like, it wasn't
Yeah.
as Instagram popularized as it is now.
Yeah, it's now insta popularized. Yeah, exactly. So, and it's been incorporated into knowledge economy, ascension culture. Again, we have all these titles for everything that I'm even making up. So, um shadow work. I mean, anyone who's ever felt anything painful or dark or been through anything ever in their whole life that is dark or feels dark or anything along those lines. Um, that's the shadow. To me, this is my definition. So the shadow work is becoming familiar with, in some ways, I would say, how your particular soul casts shadows upon the earth, so to speak. So noticing where you get triggered, noticing your patterns, noticing where you close down your heart, noticing where you self-sabotage. Like, these are, if we were going to bring them into coaching world and into like pain points for people, it would be stuff like that. People coming to you with like, I can't seem to hold down a relationship. I keep picking the same kind of guy over and over again. I was molested when I was a child, and I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm disconnected from this, that, and the other. I hate my job. I don't have, just these things that feel really heavy: loss, pain, grief, um, which we've all experienced. And some people carry more, and some people don't actually. So shadow work is basically, to me, being willing to sit with those things, to not try to get out of them, which I think is the addictive effect of ascension, or the light consciousness stuff. Is, I'm just going to go towards that, and then I don't have to feel this over here. But that follows you. It's heavy. You can't really rise. You're like a weighted to the ground. And so if you are inclined to be rising, you can't until you face the heaviness that's in you. So my shadow work course, actually, I just called it a toolkit, and I just went through 12 days, 12 days, 12 different types of tools you can use for mind, body, heart, soul, relationships, like inner child, like all these different areas in which there's a doorway into starting to face your inner landscape and your inner world. It's not sexy at all. But it goes back to that Western soulful thing where it's like it's the soul realm. It's like where the unseen hands come to hold you, and you get to heal in the infirmary of your heart, just through acknowledging what lies within. So I would say it's actually very tender, and I think all those words that I just said could be reduced down. It's finally acknowledging yourself for the first time,
I think
and
it
choosing that.
it shows to how much Insight Timer, and some of you might be listening and know me and Jessica from that app, is very East light focused.
Hmm.
And I remember her launching this course, and I was like, how does this not exist on this course yet? I think it was the first course on shadow work, and it did
Yeah.
extremely well. I think I remember
It
seeing it
did.
like it get a lot of like students fast because I think people were craving it, and it wasn't
Mhm.
on this app. So how how does going into the darkness help someone this uncover maybe a new potential gift, purpose, and maybe even speaking to your own story
Mhm.
of that, or time you went into the dark, and like, the hero's journey of coming back with something to give, if
Yes.
that relates.
Yeah, well, like almost in an opposite sense, like if you were to go east long enough, you would eventually start coming west, I believe. If you were going around the globe, right? And I think it's the same with the shadow. It's almost like you're going so deep under that you're almost crawling your way through to the other
Hmm.
side. And in that journey, you are stripped. It's like, if anyone's familiar with the story of the goddess Inanna, and she's the queen. She's the queen of heaven and earth. She rules all of heaven and earth with like golden light and a scepter, and she's all powerful queen of heaven and earth. But her sister rules the underworld, and she wanted to go visit her sister in the underworld, and so she was required to give up all of her regalements, all of her identities, all of her personality, of who it is that she thinks that she is. And in that, she could only enter the gate bowed low and naked in order to go into the underworld. So it's a stripping down, it's a vulnerability, it's getting down to the core, the truest essence of who you are. And in there you do find your oneness with all, because there's death in it, dying to who it is you think you are so you can be reborn. And in that, you're connect with the allness, the oneness. And I don't think there's anyone who's found a purpose who hasn't realized that it's connected to every other human on the planet. Like it's our purpose. When we think of purpose, really it is oneness, it is all, it is interconnectivity with life itself. So in the it's kind of just the opposite way of getting to the same place, I think.
Well, I
Um,
think, yeah, that's the real spiritual journey is always descension, right? It's always humiliation. Thomas Keating says the spiritual journey is one humiliation after another, where
it is.
we're letting go of, the ego needs to get battered and battered and battered, and labels, letting go till we're shined and sharpened and reborn in many ways. And
Mhm.
when you're up, the only way to Carl Jung has a story of when a patient would come in and said that they had a promotion at work, and he would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, now something bad's gonna happen." And then when someone, would come in and be like, "Oh my gosh, my life's falling apart, and I'm just in turmoil," and he would pop champagne and be like, "Yay, now something good's gonna come of this."
Yes.
Or there's always
Yes.
like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I have found personally that I think there can be a great relief in that being humbled and that being stripped down. You're like, "Oh, finally, God, it was so exhausting." It was so exhausting to try
Totally.
to be all these things, to try to be I'm like playing with my bangs because they're annoying me. But yeah, it's annoying. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Something that I admire you for, and I find challenges with in my own life, and is how you set boundaries.
Mm.
I'm very loose with boundaries, and I'm curious if this is a thing that you've grown into, and how are boundaries in service to your purpose?
Oh, great question. Okay. I love boundaries. No, I've not always had good boundaries. Um, Boundaries put it it was put to me, it's been put to me many different ways. Boundaries in many ways um are like teaching people how to treat us. Boundaries are like a garden where maybe there's a fence, a low white picket fence, there's the outer garden, the inner garden, there's the front porch to the house, then there's the house and going in. So boundaries is many, many, many layered thing and ever changing like a garden would be. Um, but boundaries overall for me, and I think how it best serves all my clients and students and anyone that I work with is it creates a safe, it's part of creating safety and a safe parameter. So you think about small children, and I have a lot of things to say about modern day parenting that we won't go into, but I think it's pretty boundaryless actually, because children need boundaries to come into the world. Like the world, a very, very big place for a small child, and so they need to know where the boundaries are, and that actually helps them feel safe. If you were to be like, there's no boundaries, you can have whatever you want. What do you want for dinner? What color outfit do you want to wear? I mean, these are big decisions for little kids actually. They need something more secure in like, here's your breakfast, it's bedtime, this is what's going on, and they know what to expect, and they know how far they can go into the yard and how far they can't, right? And then as you get older and you start to feel safer in the world, and you start to grow in consciousness and in awareness and an inability to cognate and be more aware of things around you, the boundaries expand around you and you can play with them more. But um as someone who had boundaries crossed a lot as a young girl, and there was no such thing as boundaries, and like there was no personal space. um I struggled for a really long time with just letting, just not even knowing what to do around managing my relationships in terms of what it would mean to say no, or to say what I wanted or needed, or even what I wanted or needed, because I was just doing what everyone else wanted or needed all the time, or I was trying to read the room and figure out who I should be and how I should be so that I could be loved and accepted and wanted. There's no boundaries. There was just room reading and doing my best to be loved, you know. I don't know if I'm saying anything there because I kind of lost the stream of the question.
Yeah, no, I think the idea of telling people or showing people how to treat you, I think that's a really powerful lesson, and I like how you think of the garden in that way too, of the different layers of boundaries, and the thought of the parenting and giving your kids boundaries. It's like, if we think of being adults, and again, this is more the East, I feel in a
Mhm.
limitless mindset, understanding or feeling in certain ways, and life life will show you boundaries, right? Life will give you your limits, and unless you have the capacity to handle when you step outside of a when you don't realize, right, when you risk something, we don't realize what you're risking, and you get that kind of humility of, holy crap, like I'm in
Mhm.
a state, and maybe I'm even thinking about like going to raves and like doing drugs and getting myself into spaces where I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even realize I can get here, right? You don't
Right.
realize that there is an edge to this, and then
Totally.
you've crossed the
Right.
edge, and you
Yeah,
pay the price
totally.
when you cross the edge. So
Yeah.
having that container, that's and such a big part of all the work we do, right? If you're on the online coaching space, or meditation space, you hear the word container a lot. It's kind of
Mhm.
funny, but that is what it's saying, right? It's like we
Yeah.
actually create a boundary around something, and then
Mhm.
like you can't cook a soup on just on the stove, right? If you try to put a bunch of ingredients on the
Right.
stove, it would just fall away, right? You need to have
Right.
the pot
Yes.
so the ingredients can get
Yeah.
hot.
Yes,
um
exactly.
so
Yeah,
so
it creates safety, it creates environment, it creates actual room. I've heard it say even artists work better when they have limitations put on their art. So I had, it's like an artist who says, "Oh, I don't want to do commercial work for another company." And, the best advice to that is do it. and see what creativity comes from the limiting parameters that, the boundaries that are put around having to work for another person and having to create art for a client. Can you still be creative in that environment? Right. And
Totally.
it sharpens us in a sense
Totally.
to have edges and to not just, be running free.
Big believer in that paradox that boundaries breed creativity, because we have
Hmm.
so much to choose. That I wrote about this recently, where like if I told you to draw a picture, you'd be like, "Whoa, okay, man." But if I told you to draw a picture of a blue animal, all of a sudden that gives your mind like, "Oh, blue animal," and that you can just kind of riff off that. Like having that
Totally.
structure
Yeah.
allows our mind to not feel an overwhelm too, because it's
Yes.
like for a kid it's
Yes.
overwhelming to not know where things end and not know what choices to, yeah, that's an
Yeah.
overwhelming feeling.
Exactly. We're all just like those little kids. It's like we do like to know. And I think that's why we're really drawn to the 5 steps to this and the seven keys to that and the
Right.
10, the 10 ways to la la la. Like we like that stuff. That's why that stuff works on us, because we do like just give us the program, tell us the protocol, tell me what to do. It's overwhelming to have to figure this all out like on our own. So yeah, part of boundaries is really creating safety and container for people to grow.
So another big boundary that you set is your December off.
Mm,
And I want to ask about rest, but more so for me, I'm trying to understand my energy cycle in learning human design. And for me, there's like an energy of creation, of initiation. And then most of the
mhm,
time, I'm actually, quote unquote, should be in a rest cycle. Like that only happens like
mm,
20% of the time. And I've been
mhm,
reflecting on like, am I forcing things? But when
mm,
I think about resting, it's almost overwhelming to me to think about, well, what do I do if I am in a rest cycle? So this
mm.
is a topic I'm very curious about, because right now I feel in that cycle, even though I am creating this podcast as we speak. But there's not something that's really like pulling me forward right now in a deep way, and so I'm trying to take that as permission to like not force things. So
Yeah.
how do you think about rest? What do you do during like your like what what
What do you do?
like, because I think about like I don't just want to like lay on the couch and like watch Netflix. Like I couldn't physically do that for longer than like an
No.
hour. Like it would be
Yeah.
impossible. So like,
Yeah.
what do you? Yeah, tell. I need to learn more.
Okay. Good. Oh my, I love this too. Lou, I'm really enjoying your questions. So I'm laughing because I'm the same way actually. Like I'm a huge proponent of rest, but it doesn't mean I'm laying on the couch watching Netflix. I'm actually a very active person. I'm like, I'm not quite a squirrel burying nuts, but I'm some kind of animal always moving things about. I like to be doing stuff. Um but to me, rest is like kind of like you were saying, it's like a rest and creative cycle. So I started really following rest cycles and starting to pay attention to my own cycles as I started to also pay attention to the seasons and the seasonal cycles that are actually happening in the weather and in the world and on the planet with the sun and darkness and light, again, because it's really dark in the winter and it's really light in the summer. And that's, to sort of start to follow seasonal cycles and then notice the cycles within me and what is coming about. So it's more of an intuitive listening. And I also created 4 courses on Insight Timer that are for that follow all the seasons and all work together. And the idea is that people would take them every year. And it takes kind of many years, but it's very cool to step back and actually be taking a look at full cycles and then looking at smaller cycles on a scale. So anyway, just what you're doing, it sounds actually like you're doing what you need to do to understand yourself and your own cycles and your own essence pace, which someone put it to me as essence pace, and I really liked that.
Mm,
My essence pace is actually quite slow. I don't like to be rushed. I don't like to be in a hurry. I'm extremely efficient though with my time. So but part of that is the rest cycle is creative cycle. So um me taking time off when I'm in a rest cycle, like an intentional rest cycle of I don't work in December and I don't work in August. And it will bleed sometimes into, longer. um,
I don't work in
it's
2023. I don't work in
Yeah, I
2024.
don't work ever again, and then like, what is work? That's the question because of the fields we're in and we work for ourselves and it's all sort of based on our creative impulses in a lot of ways. Um, it's my rest cycle in December is very much like everything in nature is going dormant. I mean, I start going into my rest cycle in the fall actually, because that's when leaves are falling. It's when everything is starting to die back. And then everything gets really, really still in the winter time. And so it takes some decompressing. It's like turbulence kind of coming down of like I'm antsy and I feel guilty. And then I'm afraid of if I don't work, what about money? And I'm like all the little builds up, all the little um little tiny stresses start to like make them like simmer, as I start to slow down. And that's kind of a turbulent little time, and it happens every year when I'm like, it's time to slow down, it's time to slow down. I go through a little bit of a panic because it feels like I'm going to die. It feels like a death. And it is. um, but then life just gets really slow and I sleep more. I meditate more. That's when my formal sitting practice becomes more active, is getting up in the dark, lighting candles. I go to bed sooner, I wake up later. I take longer showers. I do more physical stuff for my body. I spend more time stretching, more time doing yoga, more time cooking, more time. There's just it's not that I'm busy like accomplishing things. I'm just connecting with my body and my life. I'm reading more, I'm going on walks more. Um,
Kind of
and
sounds
it
like a
just,
retreat in a way.
yeah, and it kind of is, and there's also times when I'm watching TV too. It's all of it. And in that, the anxieties will come up. Oh no, I'm not creating anything. Oh no, what about money? Oh no, if I don't get a client, then I'm and then it's like, but the larger impulses, there's not an actual impulse to do something about it. It's just more a little back of the mind worry, but my actual instincts are telling me otherwise, to do something different. So listening to those instincts, like right now, I'm creating something that has come from my season of rest. So
Mm.
even that seed that's planted in the ground in the winter, it looks like nothing's happening. It's gestating. And then it starts to sprout a little bit underground. You start to get the seed of a creative idea, and in the springtime, you start to bloom again. So that's the same with our rest cycles. And then peak of summer is a rest is a rest time. Actually, all of nature is at rest in the peak of summer. So really the active times are just probably a little bit of an east and west thing, which is autumn and spring. And then you have the antithesis of winter and summer. That's really slow season. So I like to think of it like that. Here we're our busy little squirrels, and then here we're resting, as we go through the cycle.
How do you deal with that anxiety of creation? I feel like I don't have it as much with money right now, but more so of
Mhm.
like more in like, am I not making progress? Am I not growing my audience? And
Mhm.
even today, when I was a little bit more intentional of like taking some rest, even though I did
Mhm.
work on a newsletter this morning, and it was around noon. I had just before lunch, and I'm like, yeah. I also had this intention of posting more on Instagram, and I'm like, neat. No, all right. I'm gonna do a reel. I'm gonna figure out what to do. And I, found like an old newsletter. I was like, okay, I'll talk about this. But the whole time I'm like not really wanting to do it. I'm kind of like
Yeah.
forcing it.
Mhm.
And I was like, all right, whatever. I just get it out. And the content on in every other way, this content has done really well, but I share it today and it's just like really not doing great at all. And
Mhm.
and that can be a million different things. What I'm taking it as of like, that's my energy that I was putting it out there, right? It was almost like
Mhm.
like the universe saying like, yeah, like, no, don't like, listen, like, you're not, this isn't helpful. You might think that this is the answer. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to sit with that. I guess it is an anxiety of, am I wasting time? Am I falling behind? That's a big one for me. Am
Mm-hmm.
I falling behind? Am I not optimize? Am I not doing all I can in service? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I guess
Mm-hmm.
there was a question under there of how you deal with anxiety, but I guess it's just how we deal with any difficult emotion. It's just being with it long enough until it goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're noticing that, like, you're totally noticing that about yourself, which is like, I get the same, I get the same thing, but yeah. And then the investigatory questions of what, what falling behind compared to what,
Right.
and you think about like go slow to go fast, the tortoise and the hare, the like, the preparation that comes. So you have to incubate, you have to rest in order to grow. Like if nature was going full on all the time, it couldn't sustain itself. It has to
Yeah.
rejuvenate, right? So that when you get that really strong, like, just no, I don't want to, like, oh, I don't want to, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Like that energy is like, it's so
It's not good, but we've been trained. We're kind of, and I'm in that, that's that
Mhm.
kind of, also I talked about the war of art before. It's like, is that resistance? It wasn't really resistance. It was just literally like, I think I should do this and I wouldn't do this, right? Resistance, I find, is a little different of like knowing that knowing that you really have a book in you and you want to write it, but you have so much resistance to showing up to the page. Like that's like, I
Yeah.
think, more resistance, but there
Mhm.
is that mindset of, well, one, it's just a conditioning, I think, of a culture
Yeah.
to always be slaving away and pushing through. But I also have um that mindset of daily energy towards something. And
Mhm.
I've experienced growth is this growth is not linear by any means, right? Like a+1+1 does not equal 2. Like the energy, yeah, like we don't know where that's going to come from. So it's also a level of trusting that, yeah, finding that flow, because when you're feeling like you have to and you don't want to, you're not in a great state of alignment, so things aren't
Yeah.
probably going to move for you. So not to beat a
Yeah.
hammer, but I
And
think
it's,
it's an
yeah,
important
and it's
thing.
kind of the question of like falling into the belief of the, yeah, growth isn't linear. What is growth to begin with? Like what exactly, I don't know. There's just like a larger question I like to ask about. It's
Yes.
probably more on a
Well,
deeper
yeah,
philosophical level.
the deeper level, if I was gonna, like, self coach myself, I'd
Mhm.
be like, if there is a part of me that even feels like I could fall behind, like that's actually where my work is, right? Like, okay,
Right.
let's go into, oh, what is that about, right? What does that
Mhm.
mean? What am I making that mean about who I am and whatnot? And how can
Yeah.
I, work through that in my own way? Because there's a clear illusion in that. We're already here. Right? Every spiritual tradition
Yeah.
would tell us there's no, the achievement or whatever that means is never going to give us anything. It's super fun, and I for myself have a very big vision, and I love doing this work, and I'm already here, right? I've already made it.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah, and it's I relate to everything that you're saying. I relate to all of it very much. Like the vision, sometimes I'm just struck by like, whoa, like this is like there's so many cool things. I get very, very excited. I'm like, this is big. Could be so big, and everything. And I love these visions I have. They're amazing for all the places that I could go and all the things that could happen and unfold and all the things I want to create and what I want to do. And it's big energy. It's huge. It feels amazing. And it's also can be a bit overwhelming, and because you are right here and that vision is way out there. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is in some ways surrendering to the path that's choosing you. So you might have this big vision, and then it's like, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I feel bursting inside of me, the creation that is longing to be born in me. I don't know exactly if it's going to look like what I envision, but not my will, but yours be done. Take me where you need to take me, do what you need to do. And I think A Course in Miracles has a saying that's basically like, today, what would you, what would you have me say? Where would you have me go? Or like, where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Right? Like, it's sort of just this willingness to hold the vision and then trust that whatever's arriving right here, whatever wants to happen in you right now, which is rest, trusting that that has got you in that vision, that this is part of the fulfillment of that vision. And you must listen to what's arriving right now so that with each step,
Mhm.
you step into the vision
Yes.
that's before you.
Yes. Lots of trust.
It's
Speaking
it,
of
trust. Yeah.
speaking of what you're working on now and your vision, tell us about habits. I believe
Mm,
that's what you're working on.
yes.
Uh, and yeah, like what's exciting you about
Mm,
helping people with sacred habits,
mm-hmm.
and anything you want to say about it. I will say, yeah, I'll just start there.
Okay. I know, but we've been talking for a minute. Um, so it was in my downtime over December that I was really just soaking up all these little things that I've been wanting to do for myself, that I love doing. I love moving my body every day. I love doing my juice. I love doing, I do this facial reflexology thing. I do these different oil, lymphatic things, and just like this, all this body care, really. And then really wanting to get up in the morning and have my meditation practice, and loving my longer sit periods of like a full 45 minutes of quiet in the dark, and um, just like really soaking it up. And as I was, and I'm off social media, I'm not really doing the things, and it's dawning on me that like this is where, for me, God exists, is right here on an everyday level with the early morning lighting of a candle, the making of the coffee, that first hot sip, that these little things that make life rich and give it its texture and its warmth. And then just noticing how my heart feels today, how my body feels today, my mood, my tone, just the atmosphere of life that's surrounding me in any given moment on any given day. That I think some of it is too, waking up to, I have two teenagers, eventually we're not going to live together anymore, how precious that we have this time. And just all these little things. So when I think about sacred habits, so it came to me like, these are all habits. It's a habit. We're doing habits all the time. And habits is a popular word, and a lot of people are using it, and a lot of people create good habits. You create strong habits, strong life, right? Like all the whatever the thing is. But what I found in working with clients, who my clients are regular people, they work regular jobs, 40 hours a week. They're teachers, they're government, they work for the government, they're whatever, they work, they work, they go to work, and then they have their home, and they have their families, they have their life, they have their aging parents, they have their work that they're doing in themselves. They're busy, their life is full, it feels overwhelming. How in the world are they going to now incorporate eating better, or it's such a luxury to think about doing an ice bath or a cold shower, or doing green juice every day, or whatever it is. And so as I work with clients too, it's making me realize like we put all this pressure on ourselves of like, we got to change everything right now today. And that's not true. One thing, just one habit, one thing that feeds you every day, that serves you every day, that opens you up to life, that brings a sense of awe, of wonder, of enjoyment, that you want to wake up for, that makes you feel good, that feels good in your body, in your heart, in your soul. That's not crazy. 5 minutes. 5 minutes is better than no minutes. Having flexibility around it. It doesn't have to be in the morning. You can move your body anytime today for 5 minutes, right? Like just breaking it down, making it more accessible, but then finding the holiness in all these things too. The preciousness of doing the dishes, of having the house be a chaotic mess because your whole family is here together, just starting to bow low to life be humbled by how little control we have and how truly beautiful it all is and what a gift it is to be able to do any of these things on any given day. So to not see habits as a thing to track or a thing to improve us, to lose weight, to have a better body, to whatever, because those things, that's fine. I'm vain. I care about those things. But to have it be connected to something deeper, because it's not going to last if it's not connected to something deeper. And I think that that's probably where that soulfulness and maybe some of that earthiness comes into the habits, is really bringing it down to a home level, a life level, a humble level that's not trying to be a rock star, just wanting to be more engaged in your life through every little habit that you have.
I think that's the real, you're almost sending people straight to like where the spiritual journey is taking them, in a sense of
Mhm.
Adi. I just read an Adi Ashanti book and all about the path of awakening, and kind of talks about how it becomes just the most ordinary. Like your
Yes.
days are just, you're able to be, the work is just being as present in the most ordinary. And then as you do that, you find that these aren't actually ordinary, they're actually
Mm.
quite extraordinary.
Yes.
And so, a lot of, it's why a lot of all the spiritual traditions are so simple, right? You go to
Mhm.
a monastery, it's just, you do these simple things daily and you do them with full intention and attention, and that is life. Another paradox, right? When you think of the structure of a monastery creating the expansiveness and the joy and the beauty of living, right? If you were just to do whatever you wanted at a monastery, that you going off tangent a little bit,
Yeah, no, it's the same.
yeah, really beautiful and such a cool and unique way to bring an offering to the world, and I'm really excited for you, and to see how it lands. You're welcome to talk more about it. What I was going to say is that probably people aren't probably going to hear this around March or April, so I think you'd be already well on your way in
Yeah.
doing the first round, but I'm sure people
Yes.
can get
Yeah.
on to the second round.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, the first round is starting March 6th, so this will probably come out after that. And it's going to be, it's practical and spiritual together. So it's going to be 7 weeks. We're just talking about kind of psychology and philosophies behind habits. One at a time habit method is what I call it. We're not going crazy here. We're just going to build habits one at a time so that they can be sustainable. But then we're going to go into the heart space around our why, and what really serves us and what really feeds us, and not the habits that we think we should do, but the habits that are we're deeply called to do, that will support our life. And what it is that wants to be born in us, and what it is that wants to be happening, and that purpose that wants to drop down and land in us and find us. So it's both together, so it's the practices, the mundane, ordinary daily practices. We're not getting all highfalutin and shit over here. And there's like the community aspect, which goes back to my roots, which is stories from the dark side and that kind of thing, where communities coming together, and we're being examples. It's yours to do, but you don't have to do it alone. And we get to share, and we'll have a book club and different stuff too, so we get to just be in our delight, as well as make some changes that are in alignment with our hearts, in our actions, in our habits.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, whenever you're listening to this, I'm sure, hopefully you do a second round. So
That's
go.
my plan. That's my plan, is to do round one, and then do more.
See where it goes. You can't know the path; you got to just walk it.
Exactly.
Jessica, it was so fun to have this conversation. Thanks for being on. Is there any last words you want to say, or where to point people to your website, Instagram, all the things?
Yes. First, if you tracked any of that, thank you for listening to my rambles. I appreciate that. and you asking these questions, Lou, and doing this. But if you want to find me, go to staywithyourself.com. You can find me Jessica Amos on Instagram and anywhere else. You can look up Jessica Amos and Stay With Yourself, and you will find me anywhere you look.
Yes.
I will be there.
Jessica, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.